Hold up. Hi, Christina. Welcome to our little show called Real and Raw, where we keep it real and raw. And it's so good to see you, and I'm so happy to have you on this show.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. We've been talking about doing this for what, 2 years now?
I think so. And I remember our trip to Dubai where we met, we got to spend time together. Yeah, we had that great dinner and so many conversations about sex, sexuality, lifestyle, health, and thank you for that Armenian tea. I still remember.
Oh, my pleasure. Oh my God, you still remember. In which case, I would have to ship you a kilo now. I'm going back in a few days, so I'll definitely have some access and ship you a kilo.
I accept that graciously. Thank you.
And thank you.
Where are you right now?
Wait, sorry, what did you get? It was a type of sugar, but I can't remember the name. You gave me like this huge jaggery, huge cube of jaggery, which I used in all my in my teas, and it was delicious. I loved it. I am currently in Singapore.
Okay, all right. So Christina, I know it's been a rough time for so many people, but we've been speaking for the longest time on how sexuality plays an important role in our overall health. You know, whether someone's suffering from disease, not suffering from disease, whether someone's going through mental illness, emotional problems, and, you know, sex is such a vast topic. And yet so many people out there are scared to address their sexual problems. A lot of people have so many questions and they're just so scared to even ask or talk about it. So they move on to Google or they move on to pornography sites where they think most of their questions will be answered, you know, but of course that's the wrong way. And that's why I'm so happy that you made time today to join us and just talk about sexuality. But before that, I have a question for you. I know we've spent so much of time together, but just for everyone watching the show, tell us about you and how did you get into such a line? I know you consult with clients around the world. Some of my clients as well have had conversations with you, and the kind of tremendous change you brought about in their lifestyle, in their perception of sexuality, and the little exercises that you've given them have just been tremendous. So I'd like to start off first by getting to know you, you know, and in fact, our audience would love to know more about you. And how did you get into this line of sexuality where I think you have that dream job of traveling the world, meeting different people, coaching them and adding so much more value to their life? So over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this line? Was there any incident in your life that kind of, you know, motivated you to get into this line? So over to you, Christina.
Yes, I always like to joke and say that I was born with my hand on my vulva. And the reason why I say this is simply because from a very, very young age, I remember my memories as far back as 3 years old when I used to pleasure myself. And my mom actually says that I started when I was 1 year old. So when I was growing up and I started asking a lot of questions in my 20s in terms of when I was coming up with the concept for my website, Confident Lovers, I was like, I can't be the only person who started as a child to touch themselves. And I started having these beautiful, open and honest conversations. And I found out there's actually many people who started at below the age of 10, except we all kind of started in just different ages. So mine was incredibly young. During kindergarten, my favorite time was actually the 1 hour nap time because for me, it was self-pleasure time. And my mom at the time actually thought that something was wrong with me, but she wasn't sure, right? I mean, we're talking about the 1980s, and she wasn't sure if what I was doing was bad. So she actually punished me by telling me to stand against the wall and just stare at this boring wall for 2 hours. And I was like, I have no idea why I'm being punished. Does this woman not know what I'm feeling and how good this feels? But luckily, I whatever shame she was trying to sell me, I didn't buy any of it. And luckily, I'm just one of those people who never grew up with body shame, never grew up with shame around sexuality or just talking about a topic. Yes, I grew up in an incredibly conservative household where none of those conversations were being talked about. So in my teenage years, I actually resorted to porn, just like many of us do, to learn about sex. Except what I realized much later in my 20s was porn is actually adult entertainment. It's not sexual education, even though it has become the default sexual education. So all of us want to be great lovers, but we don't even know what that means. So we just resort to porn to learn how to have sex. And that was my journey as well. And for the longest time, I was thinking, I started self-pleasuring with my right hand, and all of a sudden I started self-pleasuring with my left hand. And I had no idea when this change took place. And it was not until, it took me 10 years to figure this out. And it wasn't until I was listening to a TED Talk of a guy who was saying, the TED Talk was called Your Brain on Porn. And he said, we're gonna have a whole new generation of left-hand masturbators. I was like, oh my God, that's me. So what ended up happening was this remote skill of when you're sitting in front of a laptop and masturbating to a screen, porn, you actually end up changing scenes and scrolling with your right hand and self-pleasuring with your left hand. And for 10 years, I couldn't figure out when this change happened. And that was just such a huge wake-up call for me. It was like, oh my gosh, I have actually become dependent on porn. What I also later realized was that my orgasms had also become dependent on porn, because as I was self-pleasuring, I was actually thinking of porn scenes in my head to be able to have an orgasm. And when I was having sexual experiences with my lovers and boyfriends, in order for me to get to a point of orgasm, I had to replay porn scenes in my head, which completely took me out of the intimacy that I was sharing with the other person. And I was like, okay, that's it. I have to do something about this. So came to India, went to ashram, studied meditation, started doing yoga. And one of the things that really, really hit home for me on that trip was, if you want to make change in your life, have to practice something consistently for 21 days. And I said, that's it, no more porn, no more. So I gave up masturbating for 21 days as well, but definitely no more porn. And I finally went back and I started self-pleasuring again. But after a year later, I was like, let me just test myself. Let me see if this even turns me on. And I logged on and I just noticed so many things that were just not. I noticed all the little nuances of how much it was based on performance and not connection, where it was all about, I can even like tell all the different scenes where it was cut and paste and editing, where it was all about camera angle and it was all about novelty, but none of it was about connection and pleasure and all the beauty that sex had to offer. And prior to having this experience, actually no, after that experience, I was traveling through Thailand, where I asked one of my friends, who at the time was 40 years old, I asked him a question, which was, what's the difference between having sex and making love? And he just gave me the funniest answer. And he said, I wish you had asked me what the difference was between sales and marketing, because that I can answer. So we both had a good laugh, but that was also the conversation where the next day light bulbs just went on in my head. I was like, okay, how do we learn about sex? How do we talk about sex? Consent, all the beauty that sex has to offer. Now, because now I had also been in a relationship where a man for the first time actually made love to me. And prior to having this experience with a man, I was never able to reach an orgasm during a sexual experience. So I actually thought something was wrong with me. I even went as far as getting my G-spot injected, which will be a topic for a different day.
Yeah, that's a topic we got to talk about for sure at a later point.
That's a topic at a later point. But I truly believe that something was wrong with me. And the conversations that I ended up having after this conversation in Thailand, I actually realized that there was many women who were also in the same situation I was. So during self-pleasure, we're able to give ourselves orgasms, but when we're with another person, we're not able to orgasm. Why? And it was just question after question after question. So I did some online and offline research, and I wanted to see how do the specific question I asked after this conversation was, how do men learn about sex? And I realized that there was really only, at the time in 2013, there was only two major resources. One was porn, and the other one was the pickup artist community, which you never want to have anything to do with, because again, it's never about connection. It's all about how many women you can sleep with without absolutely not connecting a genuine connection with them. And I was like, wow, no wonder so many of us feel unsafe, unsatisfied, and we're having the type of sex that's kind of like fast food sex, where it feeds you, but it doesn't nourish you, because we're so guarded and we're not able to open up with another person, and where everybody is trying to get something from one another, but we're not really sure what that is, other than just giving our body to each other, but having the type of sex that just doesn't nourish us on any level. And I started a blog to speak to men and teach men all about the fascinating female sexual anatomy, because I thought, I'm incredibly comfortable with my body. I'm incredibly comfortable to talk about sex. And all I see in the marketplace at that time was men teaching other men about the female sexual anatomy. And I thought that was really unfair. And a lot of the stuff that I looked at was really just a whole bunch of misinformation. It was all based on technique. It was, again, not based on connection. And I said, okay, I'm really going to do something about this. I'm going to change the conversation. I'm going to normalize what should already be normal. I'm going to redefine the way we talk about sexuality. I'm not going to make it vulgar. I am just going to teach men from a female perspective in terms of what we feel when we have sex. And the anatomy part of it will come later. So I created this blog, Confident Lover, at the time, and just focused on speaking to men. But I realized that 50% of my visitors were actually women. Then I started holding workshops for women and speaking about women, because every time I would tell women that I run a blog to teach men about the fabulous female sexual anatomy, they're like, oh, thank God for you. You're doing God's work. Yes, men need that. And I realized, no, we women actually need that as well, because in my 20s, I had no idea about my body. I had no idea how my organs functioned. I was having pain. I was experiencing pain during sex, and I didn't know why, and I didn't know who to talk to. There was just so many things that were happening that I can feel it, but I can't put it into language. So I thought communication and words and the way that we define things is incredibly important for the type of pleasure that we end up experiencing or not experiencing. So I changed it. So I rebranded in 2016, changed it to Confident Lovers. And now it's both men, women, and couples, singles, pretty much everyone, anything that you want to know about sexuality. And the way that I get my topics and my ideas is actually having conversations with people and doing my own offline studies outside of a lab. So one of my favorite studies that I did was I wanted to know what was the top two things that men did not enjoy during oral pleasure and blowjob. But I don't like calling it a blowjob because we're not blowing anything and it's not a job. So I like the term oral pleasure.
Yeah.
And
that kind of makes me think now, why is it called a blowjob? Yeah, there's no blowing involved at all.
And for most of us, it's not a job. There's actually a lot of women who enjoy giving oral pleasure to their partner, lover, husband, whoever that they're having a sexual experience with. And I also realized, though, how we name things give it value. So if we consider this a job, then it becomes a job. It's not a pleasurable experience. Right. And the two common answers that men gave were teeth. They don't like the feeling of teeth, of course. But the second common answer was if she's doing it only to please me and if she's not enjoying it. I said, this is actually really good studies, because I'm one of those people who simply just does not believe that sex can be studied in a in a scientific lab, where anatomy can, but the whole experience of sexuality cannot. It's actually incredibly fluid. Space has a lot to do with the type of experience that we have. And there's just so many little nuances that go into the experience where there's no way you're ever going to be able to measure anything like that. It's too fluid.
Yeah. No, I love what you said. I want to go back. I don't want to interrupt you because the flow was so good, what you were saying, but what you spoke about intimacy. You know, if men or women are, you know, are making love or having sex, but they're thinking of competing with what they saw on pornography, or they're trying to maintain some benchmark that they read about in pornography or they watched on, you know, television, how will you ever get intimate? Because your mind isn't into the experience. You're constantly trying to think like, oh no, she isn't moaning like that. Or oh no, he's not enjoying it this way. Or maybe I should step up. Maybe I should flip her over. Maybe I should do this. You can never really enjoy intimacy. And, you know, I think just ejaculation or orgasm doesn't mean that the entire session, you know, creates any intimacy. I like that point. That's very deep. It made me think a lot about that as well. But great. So yeah, so that's your path. That's where you are right now. I know you travel the world. I know you meet people all around and stuff. So just to lighten things up, how many of your clients have actually hit on you? Because it's a common thing when someone's so open with sexuality and they talk about it. You know, a lot of men get that thing that, wow, she may be easy or she loves it, or maybe I'll just try making a move on her. Does that happen? And how do you, I know it happens. I know it happens, but tell me, how do you handle it?
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. I actually get put in the category of I'm either a porn star, a prostitute, or just someone who's incredibly easy and just open with her sexuality, incredibly promiscuous. And I actually tell them right away that I have no interest. I'm actually a sexual educator, and if you're attracted to me, I'm flattered, but it's definitely a one-way attraction.
Awesome.
And we just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But yes, it does happen. And again, I try, it's not that I try, I'm very mindful of that because it has happened so many times, but I really do not speak about sexuality in a vulgar way where it gives anyone the idea that I'm just, here I am, I'm open and I want to have sex with everyone. Sex to me is actually a very sacred and intimate experience. So that's really generally how I just handle it. Is I'm just not interested.
Brilliant, and thank you for being open about the whole thing. Thank you for being open. The whole point of this show is for people to be raw. Thank you for asking that
question. No one has ever asked me that question, by the way.
That's what our audience is going to get on shows like this. The deepest part of people, because it's so easy to add frills to the show and kind of glamorize it just to, you know, just because it's got sex in it. But I think we want to make a revolution with people like you, Christina, where we give the facts up front, which are real and raw. We talk about feelings, we talk about emotions, because that's what the world is lacking right now. You know, we have so much, but we're so emotionally
what they needed.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
But that's actually what a lot of people are craving as well, is really that deep connection. They just don't know how to go about it. And just to rewind just a bit, when you said when people are thinking about like sex or pornography or trying to measure up to something during sex, I actually truly do not believe that sexual performance, like sex and performance, should never be in the same sentence, because sex is not a performance. It's not an Olympic style, grand style thing that you see in porn. There's actually a lot of editing and that happens in porn. And one of the things that I've always said is I wish the people who make porn can actually show you the what happens behind the scenes before the scene, all the negotiation that takes place, how an anal scene gets done, because there's an enema involved, there's whole like preparation work involved. And I'm saying this because one time I was on a porn set, so I got to see behind the scenes of what was happening, all the negotiation and communication that were taking place. And sometimes it takes 8 hours to film a scene, and there's breaks in between, there's lunch breaks. I mean, these are all of the things that a lot of people like myself just never saw, especially when we started watching porn at a very early age. I haven't watched porn in 7 years, and I don't miss it at all. I actually realized how much damage it had done for me because my mind just wasn't fully formed yet, and the mind is not able to process that kind of hardcore or any kind of porn. I mean, the mind basically flourishes at the age of 25. So when you're showing a teenager, and nowadays I think it's 8 years old when the average boy or girl watches porn, which is sad, because that becomes the benchmark of sexuality. And it's I think it's really time for parents to really start having some beautiful and useful conversations about sex, and not say you have to be abstinent, because that's never going to work, and it never has worked in the past.
So it's so nice that you're talking about all of this, so we can accept it as normal and natural and not shame the girl into thinking that they're doing something
Or
wrong.
the boy.
So I appreciate you sharing
Or the
your
boy,
lesson. Yeah, what you went through as a lesson for everyone else. I think that's brilliant. And Christina, when we were in Singapore, I remember the last time we met after Dubai, we were in Singapore, we met up at the Four Seasons, and we were talking about, I was talking to you about a client where we were so proud of it because we had diagnosed her with extreme urinary tract infection and a lot of burning sensation in her vagina, a lot of thrush. And I was telling you how she had been to doctors and all of that stuff, and nothing worked anymore. Antibiotics didn't work, coriander seeds, cranberry, nothing. So I got talking to her about her sexual life, and I had a nutritionist from my team, Hardika. She was with me on that call, and then she broke down and she said, we don't have sex anymore, and we're very social people, but we don't have sex. So I think that my husband doesn't like me. He doesn't appreciate me. He's not physically attractive, even though she was an attractive woman. And she said she was like craving pleasure, but it's not just a pleasure. She was craving self-respect, which she wasn't getting because she thought, her mind was making up stories that she's abandoned, she's not liked, and her husband doesn't have any physical attraction to her. So I said, why don't you start masturbating? And she was like shocked. She said, no, how can I do that? I said, you're not getting sex from your husband either ways, but you have a lot of pent up energy. So I prescribed masturbation.
So spot on. So spot on. By the way, just to quickly insert here, you're one of the very few people in the wellness industry who actually even talks about sex and prescribes self-pleasure as a force of healing. There's not many people out there like you, and I don't get that, because wellness, sexual wellness, is such a big part of our health, as you said earlier. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being so open, honest, and raw with your clients, because I mean, yeah, how can you not? I mean, back in the day in ancient China and in India, Ayurveda, I think has a whole chapter dedicated to sexual health.
That's right.
And in Taoist, and in Taoism as well, there's a whole chapter where our internal organs, so on a man's penis, like the liver, all the 5 major organs, the spleen, the liver, the kidneys, what else is there? And 2 more, the 5 major organs are basically on the penis, and there's acupressure points that you can press, including the heart, where the men actually urinate from and ejaculate from. That's your heart point. Wow. And for women as well. So for women as well, all of these 5 major organs are inside our vagina. So when we have pent up energy in our sexual organs, it's stagnant energy. You can feel so heavy in your pelvic area and in other parts of your body, because everything is incredibly connected. So yes, so you prescribed her self-pleasure, and then what happened?
Yeah, so we did it, and then I asked Hardika, my nutritionist, she's a girl. I said, just take over because the client may not be too comfortable with this. In 3 days, the client sent us a message. She got on a call with Hardika. She said everything's changed, and what you just mentioned, sexual pleasure, sexual energy. That's what was on my mind. I just felt she had too much of energy, and energy has to flow. Whether it's chemistry, whether it's medicine, energy is energy. If you suppress it, if you block it, it leads to toxicity, it leads to disease, so I just felt she has so much of pent up, blocked sexual energy, which is a real energy. Men have it, women have it, children have it, and it needs to flow. And after that, it was just unbelievable how she's not got that urinary tract infection or that burning sensation. Her relationship is much better with her husband as well, because she stopped kind of chasing it with him. And I think when you stop chasing it, it starts happening automatically. And everyth's good. And now Hardika and all of our team members prescribe masturbation as well, of course, in the most respectful way. And it's working like magic. So that conversation in the Four Seasons in Singapore with you spoke about sexual energy and how so many women have it suppressed in them. And when you allow it to flow, not just sexually, but every other aspect of that woman, their self-confidence, their esteem, everything just flows, so why be dependent on a man? Have a man, but I mean, if your man isn't satisfying you, there are other ways to keep the energy flowing. And I don't think women should be ashamed
Absolutely.
of that. Or men. Of course, there's masturbation, which people are misusing, constantly watching porn, beating themselves off,
Misusing.
and creating the same problems
Exactly.
that you mentioned that people go through. So why don't you talk to me a little bit more about this sexual energy, and even the story that you told me about the job of the doctors in the UK years and years ago was to stimulate, sexual pleasure in women from behind a,
Right.
contain. Yeah, that'll be
Behind the
good. You tell
curtain.
that story better than me.
Behind
Go
the
ahead.
curtain. Well,
Yeah.
there used to be, I think maybe it was 100 years ago. I have to fact check this in terms of how long ago it was. But there was this whole thing that used to happen, this whole diagnosis that was called hysteria. And there was a movie made, and maybe some of the factual things are not true, but this is how a vibrator got invented in the first place. Was the women who were suffering from hysteria was exactly what you just described. So they had too much energy that was not flowing, because back in the day women weren't exercising. It's not like every woman was dancing. So what were they doing? House chores, which is not enough for that excess energy. That energy has to have somewhere to go. It has to have an outlet. So if you're not working, if you're not exercising, if you're not dancing, what happens? It just gets stagnated, and then you just go crazy, because there's all this energy where it's just stuck, it's not flowing. And women were just getting diagnosed with hysteria. And it's not that there's anything wrong with them, but there were actually used to be doctors who their job was to masturbate women behind the curtain. So I wrote an entire article about this, and I watched this movie called Hysteria, and I was like, wow, a man actually invented a vibrator because their wrists and their forearms, we get so tired. Imagine having 8 patients a day, and everybody takes, however long to have an orgasm. And as soon as they would have an orgasm, they're back to normal. All of a sudden they no longer have hysteria. But my question from doing all this research was, why weren't the women at the time just giving themselves self-pleasure? That's the part that I didn't understand. And I don't think that there's any one answer, which is kind of like today, because I still have female clients who are just so wrapped up in shame, guilt, anxiety, fear. Fear, for some reason, is just such a big cultural belief that a woman should not experience pleasure, especially from the cultures that you and I come from. And they're just not willing. They're not willing to go there. And it's really like fear that's holding them back. There's just something. They're scared about experiencing pleasure, or the whole good girl programming, because a good girl doesn't do that. And yeah, there's a whole movie about this. So I really think that, we just live in a very different time. It's not our grandmother's age where women are no longer sexual, where women cannot enjoy their pleasure, because our pleasure is actually the source of our power, our beauty, our glow comes from our pleasure. And that energy just has to flow. My entire life has changed as soon as I found out about the energy of sexuality, because sexuality ultimately is an energy exchange. It's not just a penis and a vagina coming together, inserting. That could be the most unsatisfying sex on the planet, when it's just about procreation and not pleasure, and no energy flow, and no intimacy, and no connection, and no kissing, and all the different fluids that happen, and the touch and everything else that happens during either self-pleasure or a very intimate moment with a partner. So sexual energy is just, it's really our fuel for both men and women. And yes, you can misuse it. Yes, you can discharge it. And masturbating 10, 20 times a day is not a healthy way for men to experience their sexuality. You're actually draining yourself. And this is something that I've learned in Taoism as well. So men and women lose energy in different ways, and men lose their energy by ejaculating, because ejaculation in Taoism is considered a life force energy. So when you ejaculate your seeds many, many times, you're actually losing life force energy. And you have to sleep, and you have to get some rest to replenish your body to be able to have that experience again. And in a man's body, ejaculation and orgasm are actually completely 2 different processes. So ejaculation is actually a very biological urge, and men biologically are designed to ejaculate so humanity can move forward. It doesn't work like that for a woman. We don't need to orgasm from an evolutionary standpoint in order to create a human. for us, orgasm is about nothing. It's basically just pleasure for us. There's no evolutionary reason as to why a woman has an orgasm. The way that women lose energy is actually through our monthly cycles. That's how most of our energy is how we actually lose our energies through our monthly cycles. But orgasm for us is an incredibly healing force. And there's really only, for men and women, there's really two types of orgasm. One is internal, one is external.
That's interesting, because a lot of women are also shamed into, feeling that, oh, hey, you didn't have an orgasm. You've never ever felt an orgasm. And women feel like, because we counsel these women, they're like, we've never felt an orgasm. And it's like all their friends make them feel like you've missed out on life, which maybe they have in a way. But how do we help these women to understand what they're doing wrong, in not experiencing that orgasm? I know one of that is fear in the mind too, is a lot of women have said we feel guilty to have too much of pleasure. We think it's not right. So there are so many things that come up. What are your tips to women who have never really experienced an orgasm? How would you coach them? What kind of obstacles would you break down in order for them to look at this differently?
Well, there's one woman who's incredibly close to me in my life, and that's my mother. So she and I were on a hike one day, and I almost fell off the mountain because she says to me on a hike, she says, "Is orgasm that thing that I see in the movies where women just go, I was like, I was like, Mom, she's 68 years old right now, but she told me this when she was 65. I was like, Mom, have you never had an orgasm? She's like, no, I don't think I ever have. I was like, we're going home right now. We're putting a mirror and you're going to self-pleasure. And she was so embarrassed until today. I even got her a vibrator. I was like, fine, you don't want to touch yourself because so we did go home and I did put her mirror and I was like, okay, you're going to, but throughout the entire process, she was so uncomfortable. And as soon as she saw her vulva in the mirror, she said, ew. And I was like, ew, it's so beautiful. What do you mean, ew? So this is the conditioning that she grew up with, but it's so funny because no one has ever taught her that. This is just something that she just, it's self-imposed, right? Which a lot of these emotions, the guilt, the shame, the fear, all of these things are so self-imposed. And all it takes is just a mind shift. And it's not what they're doing wrong. It's nothing that they have to feel bad about or be ashamed about. It's really just a change in mind shift. That's all it is. That's all it's going to take for them. And to feel guilty for having too much pleasure, my question would be, why?
Why? Yeah.
Has anyone else in your life felt too guilty to have pleasure? And this is how some of us women actually hold ourselves back, because what they don't understand is when we have a ton of pleasure, we show up in this world like we never have before. We are better mothers, we are better lovers, we are able to serve our community in a way where we never have before, because we are so relaxed, we are not stressed, we're always smiling, we're always glowing, everybody wants to be around us. We create this incredible environment in our work, in our household, in our intimate relationships, but all of this is fueled by pleasure. And if your body is starving for that kind of connection to yourself, how are you going to be able to show up in this world and be able to make a difference and to just be and stand in your own beauty and your own raw power?
That's beautifully put.
And all it takes is really a mind. All it takes is really a mindset shift. So as soon as we clear the guilt and the shame and the anxiety and the fear, everything in our life changes. Everything.
I think that's beautiful.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe we should like schedule a Zoom time, a workshop where we just all self-pleasure in front of a camera.
Yeah, we do that.
What
Why
is
not?
it going to take?
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Just women.
All right. So, Christina, I'm going to break the video right now because we got to log in again. Okay. So log out, log in, and then the editor will stitch it together. Okay, great. So Christina, yeah, that's about sexual energy. I want to also go back to that point, where a lot of men, they also just think that a woman needs to reach an orgasm. So from the time they start having sex or making love, the only goal is to get that out of a woman that, hey, I got an orgasm. And that pressure buildup is, for so many of them, I had my own personal experience way back when I used to date, the girl would say, it's not important. It's about how I feel, irrespective. And an orgasm is not always something that we have to achieve.
That's
And
exactly what I say.
yeah, exactly what you just said. So I'm going back to that whole point. And so many women, they get orgasms sometimes they don't. And they're like, it's no big deal, but the guy feels like, so I've had guys coming and saying that, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't know if she's going to leave me and find someone else who sexually pleases her. And when I break it down, it's like 1 out of 5 times he's been unable to get his woman to an orgasm, but yet it builds up into so much of pressure for that guy. So how do you handle this? What's the kind of advice that you give to break? And then right then I can guess that guy's watching a little bit too much of pornography because his benchmark is just to get the woman to moan and have that orgasm. So what kind of advice would you give our audience on that one?
Well, it's actually putting pressure, right? And again, it's going back to performance. Sex is not about performance, it's about connection. And by the way, just because you think somebody on screen is having an orgasm, we are amazing at faking our orgasms. And most men would have no clue if she actually had an orgasm or hadn't. And here's another thing for women: don't ever fake your orgasm, because it actually makes him believe that he's amazing. But why be untrue? Why put on a show and to make something happen that never happened? And the more you do that as a woman, the more you start faking your orgasm, because let's just say you're trying to make him feel good or something else, you're actually doing yourself displeasure by doing something like that, because eventually it becomes an obligation, it becomes a performance, and it does not become about connection. So, and sometimes when it becomes an obligation for some women, they actually end up experiencing pain during sex, because eventually the body starts to associate sex with pain instead of pleasure. So when you're receptive and you're enjoying everything that's happening, and maybe it's just one of those days where your body just doesn't feel like having an orgasm, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. And by the way, same thing happens for men. I've actually had a lot of men complain to me that during sex, let's just say if they don't feel like ejaculating, a woman equally feels as bad, like she didn't do her job or he's no longer attracted to her because he doesn't ejaculate. So they try to do everything in their power to make the guy ejaculate. But again, it all goes back to performance. It's not about performance, it's about connection. And if you don't want to have an orgasm, you don't want to ejaculate, you just don't feel like it, it's fine. It's not a big deal. But I will say that there are some insensitive lovers where they just use a woman's body to masturbate and they don't care if she has an orgasm or not. Right. And it's not about that. Or they try all sorts of different techniques to make her have an orgasm. But what they don't realize is that they're actually putting pressure on her to have an orgasm, but that will also just have a reverse reaction, because as soon as you put pressure on someone, my body's going to shut down. I'm no longer relaxed because now I feel like I'm performing for you. And now I feel like I have to get to a point that makes you happy in order for me to have an orgasm. And it's just not about that, right? So it very much has a reverse reaction, that if as soon as you put pressure on someone to have a type of outcome that you want to have, they're either going to fake it or they're not going to have it, or it's going to be like a very knee-jerk style orgasm where you just do something with your hands, you press here, you do that, and then an orgasm happens, but it's not really a satisfying one.
That's amazing. That's powerful, the way you've put that out. It's just amazing because, yeah, that pressure buildup is so much. And yeah, going back to what you said, if a woman keeps faking it, the man will think he's the best, and then he's just going to kind of relax and give that same kind of, performance all the time, and the woman really isn't never going to get it, so
he's just going to become Tarzan, and he's going to say, I'm the best lover she's ever had.
I like what you said. Christina, I like what you said about, sex is not about performance, it's about connection. I just think that's so deep. That's so deep and powerful.
Yeah. I think we should trademark that. Lifestyle is, what's your tagline? Lifestyle is the new religion.
The new religion. Yeah. Yeah.
And sex should equally not be about performance. But here's a concept that I think most people are really not familiar with. When you're having a truly intimate moment with someone, the more relaxed you are, the more magic happens, and the more sexual energy just flows. I mean, it's incredible, because what you see in porn is all about like how hard it is, how fast he can go, and it's just all about this like hardcore sex, right? And that's all you see in porn. And there's like noises and all this stuff, all sorts of style Olympic performances. In real life sex, the more relaxed you are, if you can learn how to relax into pleasure, you are going to have the best sex of your life. I'm not saying give up quickies. I'm not saying give up hardcore sex. I'm not saying give up like BDSM or all the other type of sex that you're into. But if you could just get into a state of just relaxation, you're actually open up and you're more receptive to pleasure. And it's just incredible. And it's truly an incredible experience. I truly do not believe that most people today who have sex actually have heart-fulfilling, satisfying, soul-satisfying sex. They just have porn-style sex. Again, it feeds you, but it does not nourish you.
Yeah, that's so true. And so when we look at Kama Sutra as well, Kama Sutra talks about first being relaxed. The foreplay starts even before the clothes get off. And you have that whole procedure that starts into very, very magical sex, but it's the relaxation before, like you rightly said, that brings up all of the magic.
And relaxation, so for a woman, for us, it's many things. It's relaxation, but most importantly, before pleasure, it's our safety. So safety is it's a huge component for us to be able to relax and to be receptive to pleasure. And if the safety part of it is not there, or if she's angry and just stressed, or like thinking about all sorts of other things, it's just not going to be an incredibly satisfying sexual experience. But also, so foreplay, let's talk about this. Why is foreplay important? And a lot of people, the one thing that they really don't speak about, the importance of foreplay, is actually going through the process of arousal. So for men, we see on your body, because everything for a man's body happens on the outside, right? So during the arousal process, the penis, we can see the process going like this, becoming hard and erect and ready to have sex. Well, foreplay for a woman is incredibly important, because that's the time that we have to also go through the process of arousal. And the same thing that happens on a penis, which becomes erect, is the same thing that happens inside our vaginal canal. So our vaginal canal, to comfortably accept a penis, has to go through the arousal process. This is where we get wet. This is where the vaginal canal gets longer and wider to comfortably accept a penis. If that process does not happen, she ends up experiencing painful sex. And sometimes, no matter how much lubricant you use, it may still be painful to her. And I actually had this experience, and for the life of me, I actually couldn't figure out what was happening and why was I experiencing painful sex. And then I learned about this process, which in medical, in the science field, it's called vaginal tenting. So it's really just giving our vagina the chance to expand and to get wider to comfortably accept a penis. And if that doesn't happen, she actually will end up experiencing sex. And I want every man to know about this, because oftentimes they get impatient because they're hard and they expect the woman to be on the same time as their body is responding to pleasure. But unfortunately for us, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes, yes, we can very much match that, but because sexuality is so fluid, and because we have menstrual cycles, sometimes, before a menstrual cycle, we could be incredibly horny and ready to go, and we don't need that much time for arousal. Other times, after a menstrual cycle, we just may need more time. So again, it's very fluid. Sexuality is not a linear model. It's incredibly fluid. It's a dance, and you just have to learn how to be in tuned to those type of cues.
Right.
And you want to get her to the point where she just says, I want you now, or I'm ready. And I want every woman to actually be in tuned with their body to the point where they feel like they're actually ready. And just because a woman is wet, it does not mean that she's ready. Because wetness can actually come from all sorts of things. I have been on like Universal Studios rides where excitement wetness in my vagina just because of the whole excitement, but it doesn't mean that I was feeling sexual in any way. Wetness can come from dancing. It can come from exercising. It doesn't have to be a sexual encounter for a woman to feel wet. And just because she's wet, it doesn't mean she's ready for sex.
Right. That's a brilliant point. But I think, because we've had a lot of women who have come to us as well, which we've had to put onto sexual experts, where they're married, but they've never been able to have intercourse yet, and they're way past the whole comfort thing. There could be the fears, like you said, but there is a condition where the vagina just doesn't accept the penis. And no matter what, how comfortable the woman is this a condition of medical disorder? Because we've had to put those cases onto sexual experts because we didn't know how to handle this. But I've come across more than 5 to 6 women in the last 1 year who have approached us with that problem, and we've broken it down. No fear, absolutely no emotional trauma going on, very comfortable, all of that stuff, but they just can't open up. Have you come across cases like this?
I have, and the most common case is actually vaginismus, where the pelvic there's something happening with their pelvic floor. In which case I would send them to a pelvic floor specialist, because there are exercises that they have to do to tone the pelvic floor. And I would also send them to somebody who does yoni massages, or just to get their husband to do yoni massages. But I would prefer if it's a professional first versus before their husband does it, because sometimes, even though they don't have fear, even though they don't have shame or guilt or any of these things, and they're ready to have sex, but there might be something that happened to them, whether it's something that somebody said or sometime way back that they're not even aware of, right? And their body has completely shut down that part of their body to receive pleasure, but they're not yet aware of what that is. Wim Hof actually has a really good quote or saying. He says the issues are in the tissues, and when you get on the tissue level to understand what's happening there, it could be just as simple as just stagnant energy that just needs to be released. It could be as simple as that. So in Thailand, there was one massage that I had, which is called Karsane Sang. And it's basically going inside the vaginal canal and pressing all the pressure points. So on the right side, on the left side, on the top, and on the bottom of the side, and just gently massaging those points. And I actually did feel pain on the right side, which I was not even aware of, that there was pain there. And she said, okay, just breathe into that and now release it. And I did that a few times. I couldn't even feel her finger anymore.
Wow.
So it just opened. And yoni massage, I think, is really great. So yoni is the Sanskrit word for vagina, which means, I love the meaning of this, which means sacred space. And one of the things, and yoni massage, I think, is just incredible because it could be erotic, it could be therapeutic, and it could be healing. And I think if some women are experiencing this type of restriction and they're just not able to open up, I think this is a great place to start. And I would highly suggest for them to get yoni massages from a woman. I just don't think that most men are ready to give these type of massages, and the ones that do, sometimes I do have a hard time trusting.
I get it. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, no, thanks for that. And, I'm definitely going to get you back because there are loads of questions and interesting conversations that we can have. But why don't you tell me one or two of the most common issues, that men come to you for, and women? Let's do one man, one woman. The most common thing that you get asked.
The most common thing. Okay, so a lot of men are actually very insecure about their size. And for me, that's a very one-way conversation, because a lot of times we're talking about a man's size, but equally us women come in all different shapes and sizes in terms of the vaginal canal. So if somebody has, let's say, a very short or shallow vaginal canal, she's not going to be able to comfortably handle a penis that's huge. Now, it doesn't mean that she can't, it just means that she's not going to comfortably be able to handle it. Whereas someone who has a vaginal canal that's very deep and wide needs a bigger penis to be able to feel satisfied. It doesn't mean she's loose. That's not what that means. It simply just means that Us women also come in many, many different shapes and sizes as men do, but oftentimes it's really just a conversation that we have about men. And I think it's a very unfair conversation. And it's, in some ways, it's really a myth, because there's so many different positions that just because the initial compatibility, let's say if for someone, if it's too big and too painful, it doesn't mean that there aren't positions that you can do to have a satisfying sexual experience. So for any man who thinks, because oftentimes they're comparing themselves to the boys they see and please do not forget that porn is all about camera angle. So they can actually make things look a lot bigger than they are. So let's see, what do women often come to me about? A lot of it just has to do with orgasm. A lot of women are really putting pressure on themselves to have G-spot orgasms, and if they've never experienced clitoris orgasms, pressure always blocks the flow. All I ask is, if you haven't self-pleasured in front of a mirror, that's a great start, because looking at yourself and being in awe with yourself and just developing that self-love and that connection to your body is incredibly fulfilling, because then you're never insecure about your pleasure. You're never thinking about his pleasure. You actually become receptive. And I think a lot of men experience premature ejaculation because a woman, just from the start, she puts on a show and she focuses on his pleasure, and his penis can feel that, because now he has to perform and now he has to do all these things. Whereas when you're relaxed and you have a very receptive vagina, you're actually inviting a beautiful connected experience. And it's a completely different feeling. He's probably in a land where he has no idea what to do other than to just relax and enjoy the pleasures.
Yeah.
So receptivity is a huge part of female sexuality. It's not just an outward feeling. It's not like nobody can give you pleasure. That pleasure has to be received. And I think a lot of women don't know how to receive that pleasure because they're so focused on his pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's brilliant. And just a message to all the audience, especially the men, when Christina was going like this, she didn't mean it that way in that size.
Yeah, I didn't mean it.
A lot of them are going to get intimidated and think, oh no, it's got to be that big.
Well, the reason why I say this big is because this is a normal, right? I mean, it's 0.0000001% of men who probably are assuming. And usually those are like the cartoon characters. I have yet to see a human who has a third leg. But regardless, I think that's just it's a conversation that is just incredibly outdated. And we shouldn't be focused on size. We should be focused on feeling. We should be focused on receptivity. We should be focused on giving and receiving pleasure and not making it a performance. Forget about size. There's always a position that you can find to have an incredible sexual experience and really connect to your sexual energy on such a deep level that, wow, you will feel like you just went into an electrical socket. I have experienced that. It's one of the most fulfilling and satisfying experiences ever.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that's where all the penis pump ads and the whole industry eats off people's fears, men's fears of the size of their penis and all of that stuff. The whole supplement industry that promises you to add on an inch or 2 inches and stuff. I guess it feeds on the fear of this half-baked knowledge that men have, or young teenagers have.
It is, but the thing is, for wherever there is supply, there's always demand. And if the demand wasn't there wouldn't be a supply. What I would say to man is there's actually a natural way that you can add an inch or 2, even girth, just by doing pelvic floor exercises, by breathing. I mean, Taoism has an entire practice that's dedicated to revitalizing your penis and connecting to your penis. And the advice that I would give to a lot of men is, don't call your penis the dick or the cock or whatever. You can playfully, yes. But in Sanskrit, the word for penis is actually lingam, and it means wand of light. I mean, just imagine a whole new generation of men who actually thought they had a wand of light between their legs. The type of pleasure that would come, and the serene, relaxed pleasure that would come from just giving women pleasure, we would be living in a whole different world.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful because, the one thing that I've noticed in our country right now is, we have a lot of men and women. They're hot, they look good, they wear the fanciest clothing, they're like, A-listers, they're in newspapers all the time, they're at every fancy party across the country. When they come to us, and one of the questions we ask, whether someone comes to us with cancer, with diabetes, we ask about their sexual relationship and their life. And you would think they have the best life. And these are couples that actually have the minimum of it. And then, you really break it down that, who are women really dressing up to please today? Are they really doing it for the husband? Why are what husbands putting on such a show? Is it really for their wife? Is it for society? Is it for recognition, attention? And then you realize how deep that void is in couples, urban couples.
Incredibly deep.
And you move to the villages. You move to the tier 2 or tier 3 cities where the sexual lives, it makes me question my own. It's like almost every day. It's for them, it's like, if it's not every day, something's wrong. And it's like, wow, what a difference. So it's incredible. It's incredible how society, we think that the more hotness you see out there, but most of them are sexually deprived in so many ways. And they're actually envying lives of other people who probably have a decent, kind of sexual life. So that's what's happening in society today.
I mean, you will totally agree with me when I say this, but beauty, satisfaction, fulfillment, it's all an inside job. When I was in Hong Kong and I was doing women's workshops there, I remember one of the local girls, she was very wealthy, and she came to me and I was like, she was asking me to do a female workshop. And she says, for these women, for the wealthy women who were in Hong Kong, she's like, their next orgasm is a Chanel bag. And I was like, oh my God, that's so sad.
You mean their next real fake orgasm is a Chanel bag?
Yes. I mean, if that, yes. And I would love, I think, I don't know, Chanel might be mad at me because, maybe more women would be buying less Chanel if they were more satisfied. I don't know.
I think that's true, because I think in my deepest moments of intimacy, there's nothing that you crave on the outside one. Absolutely nothing. But the moment the intimacy is less, I'm looking for the next car to buy, the next kind of whatever, just stimulate your mind. So I'm so clued into that. Intimacy, as it gets lesser, we get drawn and connected with the outside world, which is material and a consumerism world, which I have nothing against, but it shouldn't be controlling you. I think you can balance between intimacy and consumerism as well.
Well, there's nothing wrong with fancy bags or cars and any of these things, as long as your value doesn't depend on it. But a lot of times, you and I come from Armenians, Indians. To me, it's the same culture, and I've spent enough time in India to just say, oh my God, these are my people. I completely understand them, and the reason why I say this is because a lot of the purchases that happen actually happen to show off wealth or whatever it is. And even like the outer beauty and all of these like things that happen, it's oftentimes just to show off to other people, and yet people are just so miserable inside. And I think if a lot of people just take the time to connect deeply into their pleasure, into fulfillment, and into just being them, all of their unhappiness will just subside. And again, there's nothing wrong with loving luxury. I'm one of those people who absolutely loves luxury, but my value is not dependent on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've assigned your value in the right place. And I agree with that completely. I think with intimacy, you don't really need to fill the voids with material things to keep on attracting attention in different ways. I think the more you focus on building intimacy, everything else falls into balance. And like you said, you can enjoy luxury and everything else, but it's where you assign the value. I like that.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times, like if a couple is really conscious of this, when they create when they make their relationship and intimacy a priority, everything in life, they actually become partners in life, right? Yeah. So the business gets better because now, let's say he's getting that beautiful feminine energy where he can go out in the world and be that masculine man who like calls the shots and does all these things, but he is the deep feminine connection. I think is incredibly important for many successful men to have a balance. I have seen many successful men who are incredibly imbalanced because that feminine aspect is really what they're missing. And I think that's why a lot of like high-powered men go to see dominatrix because there's something about the power balance where they're always in control and they're always telling people what to do. They just want to be in a position for once to just give up control.
Yeah, no, but I agree with your point, because I'll share my personal story. This is real and raw at the end. I mean, that's the whole point of the show. So the days where, I've had like a showdown with my wife before I start consulting, those are like the worst days. I have no energy. I don't have that power, which I feel is my gift to help people. But the morning starts off well, there's intimacy and everything. I mean, it's magic. It's magic that flows.
Right?
So I
just
completely
flows.
agree with what you say.
Yeah.
Intimacy it controls not just the sexual part of it, but
It's
everything that follows. I think it can make a woman or a man even feel more confident about themselves,
Absolutely.
even if they lack in terms of looks or whatever it is. You just have that
Absolutely.
beautiful inner confidence. Yeah.
And as soon as you have that inner confidence and just the fulfillment internally, it's almost the aura. Your aura just draws people in who want to be around you, and they don't even know why they want to be around you. So I completely do not agree with a lot of like just the outside enhancement that happens.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've come across, as you have, so many models and people in general who are doing amazing on paper, but they just feel so empty inside.
Yeah.
And they don't have that magnetism. They're missing that, and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. I think this is brilliant, Christina, and this is not the last show we're going to have, because in fact, I'm going to seal it right now. The next time I have your time, the question that we're going to start off is with what we discussed in Dubai. Why do men cheat after marriage?
Ooh,
why do they cheat when their
actually
wives
one
are
of the
pregnant?
questions.
We had an intimate discussion about that in Dubai, and that's always been on my mind. I can relate to it in so many different ways. And I think that's going to be the first question I ask you on our next show when we get some time. Where are you headed to next? You told me you're traveling soon, right?
Yes, I'm going to Armenia. So I'll be closer on your time zone when I'm there. And I'll be there probably, I don't know, let's see what the world looks like in October, November. I'm not making any travel plans
that makes
other
sense.
than just that. Yeah, but
Christina,
if Dubai opens, maybe we can meet in Dubai again. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting to go to Dubai. I haven't been there for about a year, but I'm following my gut instinct, and I think I'll go when, I'm guided from inside to make a trip.
Exactly.
But right now,
exactly.
I've not got that feeling yet. So.
Same. And neither do I. So that's what I'm just saying. Let's see.
Christina,
don't forget the Jaggery.
Reach out to you.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you, because, they're going to watch this. And if people want to reach out to you, can you please leave us with, of course, we'll post it as well. How do people get in touch with you? How do they look at your work? How can they book consults with you?
Yeah, sure. So everything is actually on my website, which is confidentlovers.com. And our Instagram is on there. Facebook is on there. There's a work with me page that's on there. So pretty much everything is on there. Or you could just email me, Christina@confidentlovers.com.
Awesome. We'll post that as well in the post notes of the show. And I'm looking forward to do that. We were going to do an event together in India, but then the COVID hit us. So once things are better, we are going to do that event together, maybe a 3-day event in India to probably enhance sexuality and people's own sexual powers and energies in the simplest way possible. So I look forward to that.
And really just connect them to their own body. I think that's the most important thing. As soon as we get connected to our body, life just flows. And that's the beauty of it. That's what we want. We want to normalize what should already be normal, and sex can never be understood. It has to be felt. And what keeps most people from feeling the depth of sexuality is shame, guilt, anxiety, fear, and performance.
Yep. Those are the same ingredients that bring on disease and stop people from healing when they're sick. It's energy at the end of the day. Beautiful.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me on. This was great.
Thank you, Christina. Take care, safe travels, and I'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thank you. Bye.